Good morning on the West Coast. Good morning in Mountain Time. Good afternoon Central Time. Good afternoon Eastern Time. Good evening GMT and Central Europe, or as we like to say, Can Time in June, right? I am Doug Zanger, Editor-in-Chief of Indie Agency News. Thank you so much for joining us. And thank you so much for your support of what we're doing. Little FYI, we launched a site yesterday. We're live. Not live just here, but we are live. We're live in the interwebs as well, indieagency.news, and we're very excited. Thank you to those of you who have been reaching out. Thank you to those of you who have signed up for newsletters. I'm just going to tell you right now, we are a baby organization, and that's fine because we want to grow it with you. We want you to help us grow it. That also means that if you see things that might be kind of broken, if you see something that might not like necessarily right on the site, get in touch with us because this is your community. The whole point of Indie Agency News is this is your home. This is your home. This is a place where the global indie agency community can gather and do great things together as my voice cracks. Thank you for that. That's professional broadcasting right there. I'm really thrilled about the conversation that we're going to have today. We, as an industry, deal with pitching. I was on the creative side for a long time, so pitching ideas, but also when it comes to pitching business, oh boy, I'm sure a lot of people have stories. I'm sure a lot of people have horror stories, good stories, bad stories. The one thing that we've talked about for a very long time in this industry is that pitching is expensive. When that RFI or that RFP comes in, cha-ching, cha-ching, cha-ching. Now, this anecdotal stuff is now coming out into the bright light of solid research, solidly backed up by the 4As and the ANA, and it provides some validation. It provides an opportunity for us to have a deeper conversation about pitching and how agencies and brands can benefit from both. And I do want to call out a little bit of coverage on this. Olivia Morley over at Adweek. Let me go ahead and let me work like the great producer that I was in radio for a long time. So we've got that from Olivia Morley, what agencies need to know from the ANA 4A's joint report on the cost of pitching. And then our good friend Jack Neff over at Ad Age has a great look at this as well. But we are going to go right into it with two people who have very vested interests in all of this. Matt Kasindorf, the Senior Vice President of Business Intelligence and Insight at the 4A's, joining us from Chicago. Jean Freeman, CEO and owner of independent agency Zambezi, based in Los Angeles with offices in Minneapolis, joining us today. Thank you both for joining us. Here we go. Matt, wow. There's a lot to unpack here. Let's talk about how this study even came to be. It's expansive. It's collaborative. It also signals this very important partnership between the 4As and the ANA. So I want you to go into the backstory of how the organizations came together for this research.
Sure thing. Thank you for having me on, Doug. Appreciate it. So we've been working for the past 5 years or so to rebuild the collaboration between the ANA and the 4As. It's kind of like if the parents are fighting, how do you expect the kids to get along? And we realized that if we as an industry, the agency industry, keep talking to ourselves without involving the marketer association, the marketers, the clients, probably nothing's going to happen. And it was that sort of aha that convinced us, all right, we've got to dig into this. We've all been talking about how expensive pitching is for a long, long time. We have data on it. Other industry associations have data on it. Fine. But what we realized was, in speaking with the ANA, that there is or was no quantification of the cost to the marketer. It just didn't exist. And when I raised that to the ANA and said, hey, why don't, if you're into it, why don't we collaborate on a study? They said, yes, that seems like a really smart thing to do. So that was the beginning.
And Jean,
That's how this got kicked
I'd
off.
like you to add on this too as well, because as an independent agency, and really agencies of any stripe, but as an owner and a leader at an agency, I'm certain that over time and over the years, this type of research and this type of validation and quantification is helpful in having different conversations with marketers and brands.
It definitely is. And so I was so energized and loving the fact that the 4As and the ANA work together on this. Even just kind of seeing the food, as you're using like the parents analogy, the food fight about programmatic kind of coming into can recently between the trade organizations. So I think this is a good thing to be united on. Because I think from a pitching standpoint, if you go into the data specifically for independent agencies, I feel a lot of times when things are talked about or quantified in our industry, it really focuses on the holding companies. So I was glad to see the classification between the agencies from large and small, and you could see there was different trends in between them. Again, back to the quantifiable aspect of it. So I think there's still, and I'm interested to kind of, hear more of the discussion, talk more with Matt about just the process of kind of going through that with the ANA, because I think this is a thing that's just, it's singular to our industry, right? I think architecture is another industry where it's almost like you have to do all the work in advance to then get the work, and not for a very long period of time. So if our goal is to make businesses continue to be sustainable in this industry, having us work together on it is a great first step.
Right. Matt, what would you say are three things that stood out to you that, I mean, obviously I'm from Portland, so we soften things here, that aren't great about the pitch process and the costs? What would you say are three things? And Jean, I'll ask you the same thing, that you may co-sign on some of this, but Matt, what stood out to you as not that great?
First of all, the amount of money. I mean, in anyone's book, from an individual agency standpoint, 200,000, 100,000, 400,000 is a lot of money. For any client, 373,000, 400,000 is a lot of money. And when you put that all together, and we used an estimate of one client, 3 agencies for each of the scenarios, you're talking about $1 million or $1.2 million that is being spent and is gone. Right? That's money that could be invested in other ways. It could be invested in a better relationship, right? So that was sort of the first thing, was, wow, this is actually a lot of money. The second thing I think that was very disappointing was that cost price was the number one criteria in selecting a new agency, or in choosing the winning agency. And we made the point, I made the point up on stage at the ANA's, what's called their AFM, Advertising Financial Management Conference, that price cost is not the right criteria. And then the ANA made the point that you wouldn't choose a management consultancy like that. You wouldn't choose a lawyer like that. You wouldn't choose an accountant like that. You would choose those professional services organizations based upon their effectiveness and the value they would bring to your organization. So why should choosing an agency be any different? And I think the third thing, which we all know, and it was painful to see it in the report, is the damage, the emotional damage, the relationship damage, the lack of the damage to trust that happens when you put up an account for review. And trust is sort of the bedrock of a client agency, any relationship really, but a client agency relationship. And there's data out there that has proven that strong relationships create better work, which create better results. So when that trust is torn apart, it's pretty hard to rebuild.
Gene, right? I want to touch on that one for a second, because TaylorMade is a Zambezi client, and this has been an agency client for 8 years.
8 years.
Okay, the work has been great. Mm-hmm. The results have been great. And I think, Matt, what you said about the emotional damage, and having covered agencies at Adweek and the Drum, working with agencies for Stillwell Partners in the Advertising Week B2B events, that let's start with that, Gene, and because you have a demonstrated client that you've had for a very long time that's been very successful, and that people forget that, and there are agencies. I mean, obviously, you go around Wyden and Nike, and you've got Martin and Geico, and you can start seeing some of these threads. Talk a little bit about that, because Matt said emotional damage, and I think one of the overriding things that I've seen is deflation. Mm-hmm. And so an agency feels deflated, and then especially for creatives, they feel deflated. Every creative that I've ever come across, with a few exceptions, the whole role, and Matt, you brought up another thing, professional services, not a vendor. Professional services is the right way to frame this. It absolutely is. This is not a vendor relationship, because we go on these stages and we hear brands saying, "Oh, it's our partner, it's our partner." Then when you start peeling it back, you see it's a vendor relationship. I love reframing this. Sorry, I'm getting hot here. I love this idea of reframing it as professional services, because there is inherent value in that. So, Gene, I don't know what my question is at this point, but talk about the emotional cost of that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, Matt, the idea of trust on both sides, and I think that is, using TaylorMade as an example, longtime client. I support, clients and agencies having those, really candid conversations. I think you need to, if it's going to continue to be a long-standing relationship. So quarterly business reviews, half-year business reviews where you grade each other, I think is something that we've started to institute with the idea of forming longer-term relationships. And I'm also glad to see coming out of the report, one of the steps of what needs to be instituted is really more of that relationship management. That can be a great way to avoid a lot of pitches. But I think from that, it's different. And I think you also have to realize, yes, there's obviously financial impact for loss of business. There could be implications from a staffing perspective. But if the team is so demoralized, you don't have anyone really ready and wanting to work on it, wanting to kind of continue to charge up the hill, then that's something from an executive standpoint that you have to assess. And they're never easy decisions to do that. And we've been on the flip side of both of those things. I think one of the things that I found was interesting by looking at the data is, actually incumbents are kind of favored through the data. While it can be demoralizing, a lot of times it's in their favor if an incumbent continues to be part of the pitch process. We, with our, 5 years ago, our largest client at the time, started a review. New CMO came in, immediately instituted a review, and the writing was on the wall for us that we were not going to be the long-term partner. And I think that's also something, if we kind of talk about other things within this report, the CMO turnover aspect is also something that I think that is definitely has a impact on the review cadence and cycles that we're kind of experiencing right now as an industry, as that role is emerging. If it's a revenue role, is it a commerce role? The CMO role in general is very fluid and flexible from that standpoint. And the idea of professional services, is it? I mean, I just think as an idea, sometimes as an industry, we do a very poor job at proving that we are a business value creation engine. Yes, we create, imaginative ways that a brand can kind of come to life. But at the end of the day, the why consultants, management consultants are being able to charge the premium prices that they do is they connect their services back to business impact in the brand's terms. So I was also happy to kind of see that as like agencies, we need to do a better job at selling ourselves and the impact that we can have on our business, not just the marketing.
Yep, no, I agree. And Matt, I know that you do have to cut out in about 15 minutes, so I want to make sure that we handle we handle some business here. So we talked about things that weren't necessarily great, and that's my son waving to everybody.
I'm gonna bike to my friend Zach's house.
Okay, just to let everybody know, he's biking to his friend Zach's house. So thank you for that, Ollie. You could have texted me, but that's fine. That's fine. Matt, let's talk about some really big pluses. We've talked about the not so great side of the house. Let's talk about the things that give, and hope's not even really the right word for it, because again, I think we're talking about this idea of reframing, but what are some really positive things that can help build momentum?
I think there are a few. One, quite frankly, the willingness of the ANA to do this, to be a partner in this, and an extraordinarily good partner in this, is a very, very positive thing. And the fact that the ANA themselves and stated publicly, were very disappointed that this cost price criteria was number one. That was a big disappointment to them. And we're actually, we may be looking at some additional research on thinking about cost price versus value, because it is absolutely the case that the work agencies do can be an economic multiplier for their clients. We're all aligned on this. And I think one of the things that is coming out of here is, if you look at the long-term value that a client talks about in terms of why they do a review, it's all about their business. It's about increased revenue. It's about increased this. It's about better ROI. It's about a new change in strategy, whatever it may be. And those are all things that an agency has to just keep top of mind. And it is about the work. It's about the client's work. It's about the client's business and driving that business successfully, and being allowed as a professional services partner, not a vendor, to do well as well, right? This is a partnership. It is not a vendor relationship. So I think that's very positive. And then again, some work that has come out of some other organizations, tying back the relationship to the quality of the work and the quality of the work to the results, gives me a lot of hope. And I'll use the word hope. Gives me a lot of hope.
Yeah.
That we may be starting,
which is good. And one elephant that I would like to put in the room is our in-house agencies. I don't want to say ambivalent. That's not the right word. I'm enthusiastic about it to some degree. So I look at a company like Oliver, right? I think that they do really good work because they're legitimately taking like a really strong agency model, putting them into brands, and it has the spirit, the essence, the chutzpah of an agency, and I believe that they do a very, very good job. Now, I have seen other in-house agencies that maybe it was a former agency person that came in and the work is right. So, I'm curious about this because one thing that, and I know I'm indie guy, but I worked for the Martin agency for a little over a year. And one thing that CEO Kristen Cavallo, who's CEO of a lot of things now, one of the million things that I love that she said was, you think brands think of their business 10% of the time, agencies think about their advertising 10% of the time. We think about it 100% of the time. And advertising being a broad construct and a broad, a little bit of a broad term. So, I'm curious, and I think this is probably ripe for more discussion. And I will say, in conversations that I've had with ANA CEO Bob Leodis over the years, he genuinely, and the ANA, they genuinely value those professional services that agencies bring, and they've always been very enthusiastic about it. So, I think that it's interesting to me that a brand now, and I think to your point, Matt, of turning the corner, this may be a good chance to, number one, be re-energizing that partnership, but also, how could an agency partner help their teams internally? Because I have seen that as well, where agencies do help some of their internal teams. And again, this goes back to this idea of partnership. And again, not really a question here. I'm simply monologuing because I'm very passionate about this, and I love it. I love seeing when everybody is successful. And so one of the questions here, so this does lead into a question. Why do we feel as though that we keep doing the same thing with pitching over and over when it's very clear that it's broken? Now, I understand this is an institutional issue and it's been built over many decades, but why do we keep doing the same thing? And how do we break that cycle? Matt, I want to stick with you here because I do know that you are going to be leaving us here in a short while.
This may be hard to take, but one of the reasons is, as an industry, we don't often say no. And at some point we need to. The pitch process itself, when we say it's broken, there are definitely aspects that are broken. One of the worst parts, quite frankly, is the interaction and the lack of respect. And when you think about, again, I'm going back to professional services organizations, there's a lot of respect there, right? McKinsey walks in the room, there's a fair amount of respect. Accenture, a fair amount of respect. Your lawyer, a fair amount of respect. And I think if we can get to the point where the pitch process has respect on both sides, has empathy on both sides, that it will feel better. And what I mean by that is timelines, goalposts that don't move, respect for, and I said this at the ANA's AFM conference last year, is there a real business reason why you need to see a final presentation on January 4th? How about, as a collective industry, we say we are going to take into account the respective holidays and other things in any market in which we're working. Wow, wouldn't that be nice?
Right.
No working over Thanksgiving.
Right.
It's things like that I think can help the process a great deal. Look, we can get into a conversation of spec work.
Oh,
right. Should there be spec work? Should there not be spec work? I can tell you from a data perspective, about half and half. half of our members think, nah, should be no spec work. Half of our members think, hey, spec work is how we win business. Right? Who owns the spec work? We take a harder line on that. And the ANA agrees. The agency should retain ownership of any IP presented during the pitch process unless paid appropriately by the client for that work. And appropriately does not mean a $5,000 travel stipend, which somewhere in the agreement says, and that means we own all the work that you pay us. Right. So I think it's, and Gene, you said it, it's this business, this industry, our agencies are tremendous value drivers for clients. And we have to be given that respect.
Matt, I know you have to head out, so we're going to say aloha, the goodbye version of aloha. Thank you for joining us. My guess is this is probably conversation number one of many on this, so we will pick some more things up. There's also more research coming out from the 4As around diversity that has just dropped as well. So on behalf of all of us here, thank you for all of the hard work. And this is not goodbye. This is see you later. And we wish you a good weekend. Gene, stick here. We want to continue to unpack it. Matt, take care.
Thank you. I look forward to continuing the conversation. Bye.
Gene, a lot to unpack there. Where do you want to start?
Yeah, I mean, it's the respect thing is interesting too. And I remember Kristen posting during COVID talking about like how many like Zoom pitches you were on, because it's the only way we could do it at the time, with clients with their cameras off. You know, that I think even just kind of shows from a respect gap that we have to work with. And I think what we can just do is we should point it out, you know, diplomatically. But the only way it is by us making more noise and bringing more awareness to the fact that like, this is not how business should be done. And it can be done a lot more effectively.
Right. Here's, and you know, this is the thing where if, and I don't want to say race to the bottom because that's too easy, right? It's too easy to say that if an agency is not going to take the work, there's always going to be an agency that's willing to take it at a cut rate price, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. You know, I guess, you know, where the way that I'm looking at this is, you know, how do you, so what Matt was saying, and how do you continue to unify the agency community? Because we do see fits and starts with this, where it is a little bit, and pushing back is probably the right term, right? And again, we now have these validation points, but in your mind, as an agency leader and as an agency owner, how do you approach bringing the entire chorus together? And how is that? Because I know that you have a lot of very deep relationships with a lot of independent agencies. You're a member of Worldwide Partners. So you have, and you're on the board, by the way, of Worldwide Partners. I forgot to mention that. Oh my goodness. Yeah. John Harris, good choice. Are you the president?
No.
Oh, okay. So it's like a North American crew. Okay, great. But what are those discussions like, and how do you believe that you can bring that chorus together?
Yeah, I mean, I think this is where it really like you're talking about large agencies or small agencies, because I think the pitching realities and approaches are just different between them. So from an independent agency, smaller agency aspect, you know, the rub for us is really like, are we a project agency or are we a retainer agency? And making that gap, when we talked about race to the bottom, you can quickly become that if you're a project only and don't have any visibility or opportunity for longer term contracts. And so, but I think, you know, like Worldwide Partners, they provide that framework and camaraderie so you can really talk about it. I mean, 4As as well. Like 4As has made great strides in the last few years to also accommodate the realities of independent and smaller agencies. Because I think if, you're looking at it just through the New York lens, the industry is changing greatly from that aspect.
Right.
But it's really just seeing where you are and where you want your business to continue to go. If growth is the game, then what I've found is right when you hit around 50 people, the infrastructure that you have around it really changes. And so around 50 people, you have to have new business dedicated people because of the speed of outreach and inbound from that aspect. So a lot of times it's also where you are in terms of, from a business standpoint, and then visibility, getting your name out there. As you know, Christy Heiler and I started Own It earlier this year, which really was to show there's less than 1% of agencies in the industry are women owned, and to provide a community for women owners. And the response that we have gotten from women owners of just so glad that they have people that they can talk to that are in similar situations. So the stronger the community that we can have, and the open sharing of, different MSA templates. Oh, here's how we respond to these types of things. It's more unified from that aspect, which I do think is something specific more for indie. It's the indie mentality of, let's all help each other and get better and smarter, because this business is changing by the moment, as you know. So.
Right. Ergo, why we're doing this, by the way. Now somebody asked me, like, why are you doing this? It's like, well, most of my career has been agency-ish, and like the indies, it's like, and again, I worked for an IPG agency, loved it. I can't say enough great things about the people at the Martin agency. But the cut of my jib is indie, so I'm excited to bring this community together, and it's actually making me think of, okay, what groups can we continue to build on the platform to address that? Because MSA, that's a big deal. That's that's such a big deal, and it's not a throwaway. It's not a throwaway. I'm going to ask one more question, and then we'll call it good for now. But again, I think that we're ripe for a lot more discussion on this. So talk about indies in particular. And maybe it's through your experience, maybe it's through observation, maybe it's through some of the relationships that you've built over time. So a lot of indies and smaller shops in particular may not necessarily have the resources to invest in pitching. But that said, indies really can stand a good chance to break through. There are definitely stories of independents toppling holding company agencies and pitches. What should indies know about the process and how they can break through?
Yeah, I think it's really being honest with why you're being included into the pitch, and really vetting that appropriately. A lot of times we get added to very large scale pitches because we're checking the women-owned box. And so that's one of the things to really kind of vet on, why are we really being included? So then you can determine if you really have a viable chance or if you're a stalking horse. And so that comes to relationships. And so the other thing, in terms of those larger scale pitches where you're pitching against holding company competition, you have to have someone on the inside that and can communicate with going through that process. If you don't have any visibility into the internal organization, it's probably going to be pretty tricky for you to really be a contender in that, because there are so many backroom discussions, consultant led or not. So those would be my two things off the cuff to really kind of take into consideration. On getting into a larger scale pitch where, you know that you're going to be competing against agencies that are going to be putting like $300,000. I mean, you read some of these stats where
it's wild. Yeah.
Wild. You're like $400,000 for a pitch. Ugh. I can do that once every 18 months. I can't do that once a month.
Yeah. It's wild. No, it's wild. No, I smell think piece on that topic, and definitely more topics. That's code for I'm going to make you write some stuff. Okay. Again, this is probably chapter 1 of a much longer book, because this issue continues to grow. And again, we now have this validation. So I encourage everybody to go to the ANA's website. We will post this video and also some takeaways on our site as well early next week, so that you have a chance to dig in a little bit. And we'll also include that link to the 4As and specifically that research. And also we'll throw a little link in on Zambezi so you can see what they're up to in their work. A few housekeeping things just before we cut out. Next Wednesday, July 26th, Marketing Brews Minda Smiley's birthday. So Minda Smiley is celebrating another birthday. I don't know which number this is. I'm only embarrassing her publicly because, number one, we worked together for many, many years, and that's what friends do, right, Jean?
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of what we do. I will say that she does like edible arrangements. I did once send her a Hello Kitty themed edible arrangement. So any bits of fun with that, you can get that over to Minda, and we'll all celebrate next Wednesday. That's kind of like an indie feel to it, right? Just weird. Yeah, you've known me long enough for that, Jean, right? Right, exactly. All right, on behalf of everybody at Indie Agency News, Jean Freeman, thank you so much for joining us. Always great to have you here. And we wish you all the very best. And Indies, let's just keep going. Let's keep growing. We'll see you next time.
Bye.